The iron smelled of blood before you even saw it. Not fresh blood, older, rusting, baked into every hinge and latch. The torchlight dances on the damp stone walls, its flicker illuminating shapes you wish had stayed hidden. There, in the shadows, a wooden frame darkened by 1,000 screams, and beside it, chains, splinters, a mask forged in hell's imagination. You can hear the slow drip of water echo through the silence. Or is it a tear from the prisoner who came before? In this place, justice has no warmth. Only steel, only silence. Only the slow unraveling of the human soul. And now, the door has shut behind you. You are alone, and they are waiting. If this story haunts the corners of your imagination, tell me, could you have survived the cold logic of pain disguised as order? Subscribe and share your thoughts below. What image lingers longest in your mind? It was not the darkness that frightened you, but the hush, the kind of hush that only exists beneath stone, in places untouched by wind, where silence feels thicker than breath. The torch sputters in its iron cradle, its flame trembling like a secret too afraid to speak. Walls glisten with condensation, not from cold air, but from centuries of human exhale. Prisoners, monks, judges, ghosts. The scent is old, leather, rust, and the faint rot of forgotten things. Beneath your feet, straw crackles, but not straw alone. Fragments of things once living. A bone small enough to be a child's. A tooth, a fingernail buried like a seed in the dust. You are here not by choice, but by invitation. Not of men, but of memory. They say time is linear, but here it coils like smoke in a sealed chamber. The door creaks shut behind you with the groan of something ancient remembering its duty. Its iron latch clicks into place softly, but with finality. No voices echo down these corridors, only the echo of choices once made and never unmade. You've stepped through a threshold that cannot be seen in daylight. The threshold between what was done and what was allowed. This is not a prison, this is a stage. And you, quiet traveler, have just stepped behind the curtain. If this story chills your breath or stirs your imagination, subscribe and share it with someone who listens between the lines of history, and tell me if that door closed behind you, would you knock to be let out? Or listen to what the shadows have to say? You move slowly, each step testing the floor as though it might fall away beneath you. The stone is damp, veined with moss and time, and worn smooth where countless boots once passed. Soldiers, scribes, jailers, priests, all long dead. And yet, it feels as though their footsteps still ring ahead of yours. This place has a pulse, but not one that comes from life. It is the rhythm of breath held too long. Somewhere in the distance, water drips, deliberate, relentless, echoing through the black. Each drop feels like a countdown, though to what you do not know, you reach. A narrow archway, carved without ornament, only the wear of years. Above it, scratched into the stone with a hand that bled to finish the task. A single Latin phrase, veritas per dolorem, truth through pain. You do not speak the language, but something in your body understands. Your shoulders stiffen. Your heart slows. You step through. The chamber opens like a wound. It is low-ceilinged, no larger than a modest bedroom, yet somehow vast in presence. The torchlight reveals it in slow layers. Iron rings embedded in the walls. A bench, not for sitting, but binding. Ropes coiled like sleeping serpents. And in the corner, a drain carved into the floor, crusted now with rust and time, but still hungry. You imagine someone kneeling here once, not in prayer, but in surrender. A woman, perhaps, barefoot, her dress torn where fingers gripped too hard, or a man, drunk with fear, shouting that he knows nothing. They all shouted that in the beginning, there's a stool in the corner, worn smooth at the edges. Someone sat there, often not a prisoner, a witness, a watcher. Maybe he took notes, maybe he simply listened, but always he stayed dry while others bled. A breeze shifts the torch. For a moment, the shadows move like figures, reaching, recoiling, remembering that you are not alone here, but no one is with you. It is in this chamber that you begin to understand. This was not a place of punishment. It was a place of transformation. Not spiritual, not divine, but anatomical. Bones were realigned, skin unzipped, voices changed pitch, names changed meanings. What was once a confession became a performance. What was once a man became a message. The idea of justice, as you've known it, does not exist in this room. There is only balance, one weight against another. Truth weighed against flesh. Silence against screams. In the corner, you find a bundle of fabric. At first glance, it appears to be rags, but as you lift it, the cloth falls into the rough outline of a shirt. A sleeve. A child's stitching still holds the shape of a small shoulder. There's blood along the hem brown, now crusted into pattern. You don't ask how it came to be here. You already know. The torch flickers again. Not from wind, you hold your breath. Somewhere in the distance, a door creaks. Not the one behind you, a different one, deeper. This dungeon has more chambers, more rooms, more stories. But this is where you begin. You take one last look at the shirt. You set it down gently, as though the child might still be dreaming. Inside it, then, with a final glance at the stone-carved Latin, you step back into the corridor. The echo of your footfall is the only sound, the only living sound. Behind you, the chamber closes its eyes once more. Ahead of you, something waits, not with teeth, but with a voice. You hear him before you see him. A voice, low, even, and dry as parchment, sifting through the air like falling ash. It does not echo like your footsteps. It seeps unfurling through the cracks in the stone like smoke from a censer. Pain, it says, almost gently, is the language through which truth is made clean. You stop. There is no direction to the sound. It is not behind you, nor ahead, but within, as though the walls themselves are remembering what he said long ago, or worse, what he still believes. There is a bench in the center of the corridor, unused now, its surface warped with time. You sit, uncertain why, except that the voice wants you to. The flame of your torch barely illuminates the alcove, and yet you feel no fear, only a slow rising chill that climbs your spine like a ladder of ice. The voice continues. You imagine cruelty, it says, but cruelty is the work of chaos. What we did here was order. A shape begins to form, not before your eyes, but in your mind. Robes, black, wool heavy as morning, fingers stained with ink. A crucifix not of gold, but of iron, worn from much touching. He has no name now. Perhaps he never did. He is the Inquisitor, and he is not your enemy, not in the way you expected. Mercy, he says, was silence. And silence could only be bought with confession. The room shifts around you. Your torch flickers against the stone, and suddenly the bench beside you is not empty. A woman kneels there, barefoot, bruised, a veil torn from her head and clutched in shaking hands. Her lips move, but the words are lost beneath the drone of prayer. The Inquisitor is praying too, not for her, over her, as if the syllables might lift her from sin by force. Then he stops. The air stills. He begins to tell you a story, not in voice, but in presence. You do not know how you receive it, only that you do. A man once stood in this place, a minor priest, enamored of astronomy. He believed the heavens moved, not in perfect circles, but in ellipses, imperfect, flawed, divine. He said God could tolerate asymmetry, that he must, for how else could he bear humanity? The Inquisitor questioned him for 6 days, not with questions, but with iron. By the end, the priest agreed that the stars were circles, that God was perfect. That man was not. He died a week later, not from wounds, but from shame. The voice returns. I mourned him, the Inquisitor says, as I mourn them all. You feel something tighten in your chest. Not fear, not pity, something stranger. Recognition. He was not mad. He believed, as purely as any martyr, and that belief made him terrible. You ask, not aloud, but in the quiet place of thought, how he could justify what was done. The answer comes like a sigh behind your ear. Because I loved them, he whispers, and no one else would cleanse them. Suddenly, the corridor is filled with sound. Not screams, not yet, but recitations, liturgies, creeds, oaths. In Latin, in German, in tongues long swallowed by empire, and all of them laced with breath, panting, broken, urgent. It is the sound of faith kneeling before fear. You rise. The bench is empty again. The woman is gone. The silence returns, but it no longer feels hollow. It feels watched. The Inquisitor does not follow you, but his presence does. You descend a stairwell carved unevenly from stone, as if by hands too tired to care for symmetry. The steps curve downward, not in a spiral, but in a slow, deliberate arc, like the path of justice bending toward something, but not righteousness, only control. You reach another door. This one does not creak. It yields, as though it knows. You have come to understand. Inside there is nothing but darkness and the faint smell of wax. You light a second torch. Its glow reveals the edges of a chamber draped in black. At its center, a table, wide and low. Upon it, scrolls lie open, records, names, dates, sins, but no judgments, only outcomes. A single chair sits beside the table, her back, ornate, out of place. You touch its arm and find it warm. He sat here, the voice says, and when he wrote your name, he did not hate you. You step back. The torch shakes in your hand, not from fear, but from the unbearable weight of understanding. He believed in a world of purity, and to him, pain was the fire that burned the impurities away. The voice is fading now, retreating, not into silence, but into you. You carry it now, not as possession, but as echo. The chair remains, the table, the scrolls, but the whisper is gone. The stone beneath your feet grows colder, as if each step draws you deeper into a memory the earth would rather forget. The walls seem narrower now, pressing close like ribs around a heart that no longer beats. The torchlight falters for a moment, casting your shadow in sharp, twitching fragments across the corridor. You tighten your grip. Ahead, the passage opens. Again, but not into a chamber of ritual or law. This place is simpler, smaller, not designed for pageantry or confession, but for something older, cruder. This is where pain was stripped of its robes, where fear was not wielded with theology, but with iron. You step forward. The room receives you like a lung-drawing breath. It smells of rust, of sweat sealed into stone. You feel it before you see it, the tension in the air, like a violin string, pulled too tight, as though the walls themselves remember the moments they could not contain. In the center, there is a frame, wooden, upright. Its grain is blackened with time and something darker than rot. Leather straps dangle from its arms, like the broken laces of a long-discarded shoe. You imagine it once stood taller, more rigid. But the wood has slumped now, weary from holding so much pain. Beside it, a stool, small, three-legged, with a seat. Worn smooth, you know what it's for. Not comfort, observation. You lower yourself onto it. It creaks softly under your weight, a groan too familiar, too human. From the corner of the chamber, a sound emerges, faint, rhythmic, a tapping. Your eyes follow it to a rusted pail, swinging gently from a chain. The wind cannot reach here. There is no draft, and yet it moves. You blink, and the room begins to change, not with light, but with memory. You hear footsteps, not yours, bare, hesitant, brushing straw. He was 17, that is what they wrote, though whether it was true, no one cared. A thief, they said. A pickpocket, perhaps, perhaps not. He had no name here, only a body, and a body was enough. He was slight, the kind of slight born not of youth, but hunger. Collarbone like a handle beneath his skin. Eyes too large for his face, always searching, always watching. Even as they bound his wrists, first one, then the other, he said. He did not understand, but the man who worked the winch did not ask for understanding. The boy was hoisted, slowly, deliberately. His feet left the floor, his shoulders screamed, and when they stopped screaming, they tore. The frame took his weight without protest. They let him hang, not to kill him, not yet. That was never the point. You watch now, unable to stop yourself. His back arches, his toes scratch at the air, like talons. His lips open but form no words, only sound. They told him to confess, not to the theft, but to names. Others, he did not know them. He said that again and again, as the rope bit deeper. Eventually, his words broke, not into truth, but into pleading. He was lowered, not in mercy, but for repositioning. You rise from the stool, walk slowly around the frame. You can see where the wood has warped, not from use, but from pressure. Pressure that came not from machinery, but from the simple weight of a human body. You place your hand on the beam. It is cold, but beneath it faint, almost imperceptible, a warmth, or a memory of warmth, as though somewhere the boy still lingers. They said he was released. After 2 days, no charges were recorded, no restitution paid. His name never entered the court books. He disappeared into the alleys, into the wind, into the ache between ribs where breath hides. You wonder, did he steal again? Did he live long enough to grow into his face? Or did he simply stop speaking altogether? You imagine him older, limping perhaps, one arm crooked at the shoulder, a hand that trembles when he tries to light a fire. He never tells the story, not because it is secret, but because it has no words, not anymore. There is a cloth in the corner, stiff, brown, crusted into folds. You do not pick it up. You've learned by now, some things are not forgotten, only left untouched. The The sound of the pail swinging fades. The silence thickens. You turn to leave at the threshold. You pause. Look back, and you see it just for a moment, the faint outline of a figure in the frame, young, hollow-eyed, watching, not with hate, but with the kind of patience only pain can teach. You lower your torch and step into the dark beyond. Asterisk, the corridor now descends, and with it, the warmth of your skin. The air grows stiller. Not quiet, that would be mercy, but heavier, like the hush before a verdict. You place your hand on the wall for balance. It's damp, slick with time. The stone here has been touched by too many hands to remember, each one pressing a story into its surface. You wonder if your own is now among them. The steps are uneven, carved not by craftsmen, but by custodians of a darker craft. Each one lowers you deeper into the logic of suffering. You enter another chamber, wider, colder, but what chills you is not what you see, it is what you don't. There are no chains on the walls, no splinters, no stains. This room is clean. Its symmetry is unsettling. A table stands in the center, not for restraint, but for design. On it, scrolls, charts, quills, lying crosswise atop inkpots. Everything in place. Everything precise. This was no room of impulse. This was where the pain was planned to approach the table. The parchment before you is covered in ink, dark strokes, angular letters, circles of names. One column reads, method, another, duration, another still, desired result. There is nothing emotional in the ink. It flows like water poured into grooves. To your right, a rack of tools. Not instruments of torment, measuring tools, calipers, weights, angled sticks for determining stretch tolerance. Beside them, a scale, balanced, untouched. This was not cruelty for cruelty's sake. It was administration. A ledger lies open nearby. You lean over to read its heading. Confession metrics, March 1314. Your eye lingers on the list of entries. Name, age, allegation, method employed. Time to first admission. Time to breakdown. Outcome next to each name, a number. A column marked simply, efficient, with check marks. You run your finger along the edge of the parchment. It curls slightly, crackled by age, but intact. You realize no blood ever touched these pages. That was the point. This is where they learned how to refine. You lift another sheet. A diagram unfolds. A body not drawn in artistry, but in calculation. Arrows point to joints, ligaments, nerve bundles. Notes in the margin detail optimal tension limits. How many turns of the wheel before shoulder separation? How many minutes before vocal fatigue? The body on the page is not a body. It is a process. You sit. The chair is her-backed, carved with care. It creaks as you lower yourself, but does not shift. This seat was made to observe, not to act, and suddenly you feel the presence of a man, not beside you within the chair. He was not cruel, not sadistic. He was meticulous. He wore robes, not unlike a physician's. He took notes during every session, reviewed them, adjusted variables. Where others saw horror, he saw opportunity to improve, to economize, to learn. He believed in the craft of confession. A woman once entered this room in silence. She was 32, a midwife, accused by her neighbors of dark arts. No wounds adorned her body, not yet. Instead, the inquisitor began with her profile. Marital status, widowed, children, 3, all deceased, religious habits, inconsistent. And then the chart began. Phase 1, isolation. Phase 2, deprivation. Phase 3, pressure. Phase 4, revelation. Each phase had variables. Each confession was a trial run. If she confessed early, they marked her as responsive. If she resisted, they turned to more persuasive tools. But the thing that unsettles you most is not the story. It is the care, the softness of the handwriting, the calmness of the ink. There was no glee here, only diligence. You rise, walk the edge of the room. There are shelves stacked with scrolls, some sealed, some frayed. You pull one gently. It reads, Case Study, Johannes, Apprentice, Mason, Heresy, Suspicion. The ink is faded, but the story remains. Dreams of flying, unorthodox prayers, visions of angels without faces. His sessions were prolonged due to spiritual ambiguity. They did not believe he lied. They believed he did not know he lied. And so they taught him truth, one vertebra at a time. You return the scroll, not out of reverence, but because you've learnt enough at the far end of the chamber. Another door waits. This one is smaller. Hunched, it forces you to bow your head as you pass through. An unintended gesture of humility, or perhaps not unintended at all. As you rise on the other side, you find yourself in a narrower hall, no markings, no candlelight. But you understand now, none of this was chaos. Every brick was placed by intent, every scream calculated, every silence weighed. The dungeon was not madness, it was method. You continue on, no longer searching for justice in the dark, only for what comes next. It waits like something sleeping, long wooden stained, the color of old bark. Though no tree ever bore such grain, its surface is polished smooth, not by sandpaper or care, but by the shifting of bodies and the slow grind of restraint. At one end, a great wheel, iron-rimmed and solid, silent as a tombstone. At the other, a fixed bar, notched and splintered, where leather once rubbed raw. The rack, a name whispered in terror. But here it is, only an object, still, patient. You step closer, and the air thickens. Not with scent, there is no rot here, not any more. The damp stone has drunk every drop of blood and sorrow, leaving only the ghost of tension. The rack does not carry memories like other devices do. It stores them, like a coffin. You place your hand on its edge. The wood is cold, but not unfeeling. You can almost sense the weight it once bore. Dozens of lives, hundreds of limbs, each one a story, a secret, a plea pulled until it snapped. And then you see him, not clearly, not with your eyes, but with something deeper. A man, tall once, proud, a knight, perhaps. His boots bore the mud of distant campaigns. His chest had known armor, but here he wore only linen and defiance. He was accused of heresy, not loudly, quietly, as was the custom. His tongue had wandered in a tavern. His stories grew too colorful, his metaphors too bold. He spoke of the church as a house with too many doors, of heaven as a road paved in doubt. He did not believe he was a threat, but belief was irrelevant. The night was brought here in silence. No chains, just hands on his arms, firm but not cruel. He knew what awaited, and still he stood tall. They asked him once, "Do you recant?" He answered, "I have not sinned." They nodded, as if that, too, was expected. He was laid upon the rack. His wrists were bound in leather. stretched to meet the turning wheel, his ankles fastened at the far bar. His body became a question mark, waiting to be answered. The wheel turned. Once, he gasped, not in pain, but in surprise, as though he hadn't believed it would begin so soon. Twice the joints in his shoulders whispered against themselves, a slow tearing like cloth unraveling. 3 times his voice left him, not in a scream. In a breath, they paused. Asked again, he said nothing. They turned again and again. You can see him now, almost clearly, his mouth open, lips trembling, but still forming no words. Not defiance, not faith, just endurance. The torturer's assistant marked each turn, noted the resistance, the movement of limbs, the timing of tears. After 13 turns, his elbows gave. After 16, his left shoulder collapsed. They stopped at 17, not because they had broken him, but because that was the limit of the wood. He was unbound, carried, not led. The physician inspected his body, not to heal him, but to document the yield. He lived another 4 days. His confession was signed with a THUMBPRINT. He never spoke again. You walk slowly around the rack now. Each groove, each stain, is a sentence. In the story of suffering, you notice a faint engraving along the edge. Not Latin, this time. Just initials. Perhaps carved by a guard, or a prisoner, or a boy tasked with cleaning the room after the sessions ended. In the corner, a stool leans against the wall. A long wooden pole rests beside it, once used to keep the wheel turning steadily. You pick it up. It feels too light, too simple. You return it to its place, and then you look up. Above the rack, in the stone, there's a small opening, no larger than a fist. A hole drilled into the wall, positioned just so. A passage for sound. There was always someone listening, even when no one answered. You lower your torch. The shadows close around the rack once more. But it does not vanish. It lingers, like a question, like a body held in tension. Long after the ropes are cut, it rests in a velvet-lined box, small, unassuming. Its petals are closed, like a metal bud, not yet in bloom. You almost pass it by, compared to the rack, the wheel, the gallows. It feels too quiet to be cruel. But when you lift it, it is heavier than it appears. Dense, deliberate, forged with purpose. Though the purpose is unspeakable, they called it the pear, a name chosen for its shape, its mimicry of something natural, something sweet. But this fruit was never meant to nourish. It was meant to open. You set it down on the table, and even the wood seems to recoil at its base, a turning screw, and inside, hidden beneath those steel petals, the cruelest secret of all, silence. Not of the torturer, not of the condemned, but of the record. For this device left no lasting wound, no visible scar, just the memory of metal forcing its way into places where voices once lived. You close your eyes, and you see her. She wore a scarf the color of worn lilac, and hands calloused from years of labor. A midwife. Her fingers knew the weight of life before it breathed. Her eyes knew when not to speak, and it was this, her silence, that made the villagers suspicious. A child had died in the birthing, a mother too. Whispers crept like frost. Beneath the thatch, they said the child was marked, that the mother had not screamed, that only witches deliver such quiet death. She was taken in the night. No struggle, no protest. She wrapped her scarf around her shoulders and followed them through the streets. The court did not need evidence, only fear. They asked her to name her sisters. She said she had none. They asked for the herbs she used. She said none beyond rosemary and rue. They asked if she had spoken charms. She said only prayers. They offered her the pear at first. She didn't understand. She thought it was a tool, a relic, something sacred. And then they turned the screw. The petals opened, not all at once, but slowly, like a bloom unraveling. Under winter's breath, for sharp leaves, polished to points, widened outward with each turn. They told her it would be. Placed in her mouth, they lied. It was meant for women, specifically, designed not for confession, but for erasure. The mouth, the womb, the space between. Wherever a voice could be born, the pear would blossom. They inserted it cold. No blood, just pressure. At first, she clenched her hands, then her teeth, then her eyes. They turned the screw, her body tensed. Again, the petals opened further. The pain came not from tearing, but from splitting. The body has seams, lines it was never meant to cross. The pear found them all. Still, she did not scream. Not at first. When she did, it was hoarse. Not like a woman, not like an animal, like wood cracking in a hearth. They asked again, names, charms. Sin. She gave none. They turned again. Eventually, the petals refused to close. They locked in place, jammed with her blood. She was left in silence, not from punishment, but from the breaking of something no doctor could name. The midwife survived, but her mouth never opened the same again. Not for speech, not for song, not for breath deeper than a whisper. She returned to her village. They would not meet her eyes. She tended no more births. The scarf remained, folded on her shelf. You open your eyes. The pear is still there, closed, innocent. A flower waiting for breath. You touch its petal just once. It is smoother than glass, cold as bone beneath frost. You close the lid, and the silence deepens. It waits in the corner, cloaked in shadow, nearly mistaken for furniture forgotten. At first glance, it resembles a throne, tall-backed, wide-seated, its frame fashioned from heavy oak, darkened by time and breath. But as you approach, the illusion collapses. The chair is no throne, it is a cage of needles. Hundreds of iron spikes rise from every surface. The seat, the arms, the back, even the footrest. Each, one hand forged, each one set at a slightly different angle. Some dull, some still cruelly sharp. Together, they form a garden of agony, invisible until the moment you are forced to sit. You stand before it now, your torchlight catching the tips of the spikes, casting hundreds of tiny shadows that ripple like bristles across its surface. It is not stained in blood, it is stained in stillness. You can see her, not in vision, in posture. A woman, once elegant, her back once straight, her chin lifted like someone used to being seen. A nobleman's wife, perhaps, or a merchant's daughter, with a spine made of pride she had spoken too freely. Perhaps about taxes, perhaps about tithes, perhaps about a man who wasn't her husband. It didn't matter. When she was brought to the chair, she was not bound. That was the beauty of the device. It did not need restraints. The very act of sitting upon it was the restraint. They instructed her to lower herself. She hesitated, only a breath, and then obeyed. The first contact was a gasp, not from pain, from the knowledge of what was to come. The iron welcomed her like 100 cold fingers pressing into flesh. Her weight drove her deeper into the embrace. She tried to shift, to lessen it, but the movement only awakened new spikes. She went still. Her dress did little to shield her. Linen yielded quickly. The thorns found their way. An hour passed. Then too they did not shout at her. They asked gently, repeatedly, her name, her lover's name, the place she had kept the letters. She gave none. The pain was not sharp. It was everywhere, like a fire lit beneath the skin, burning slowly inward. They brought water. She would not. Drink to move was to sink further. Eventually, her breathing changed, not faster, slower. The body, when denied the luxury of motion, begins to forget how to need. At some point, she stopped responding. They did not lift her immediately. They waited. When they finally did, she did not cry out. She made no sound at all. Her body came away slowly, inch by inch, each spike reluctant to release the shape it had cradled. Her dress remained behind in tatters. She was carried out, alive, but like a candle that had forgotten flame, the chair remained uncloned, untouched for days. It held the memory of her shape. You walk around it now, carefully. You imagine lowering yourself, just enough to feel the first points kiss your skin. You wonder how many sat here, rather than screamed. How many chose silence, not as defiance, but as necessity. You reach for the armrest, then stop. Something glints beneath it, not metal. A bead, a rosary pearl. It must have fallen from someone's trembling hand, caught between clenched fingers in prayer. You leave it there. Some prayers should never be finished. You take one last look at the chair. It does not ask for forgiveness. It does not offer memory. It simply waits. The room is round, circular, like the wheel it once housed. Its walls bear no windows, and yet you feel watched, as if the stones themselves recall what they witnessed here. The torch in your hand casts flickering patterns across the floor, and in its center you see the remnants, the iron ring of the base. Rusted bolts still buried deep into the stone. The wheel is gone now, but its echo remains. And in that echo, a scream, high, sharp, and unfinished. You walk slowly, tracing the circumference of the space. It's wide, wider than you expected. Not a dungeon, not a cell. This was a theater, a place where justice was seen. They called it the breaking wheel, the Catherine wheel, in borrowed reverence. But what happened here had nothing of sainthood. This was where bones were turned into lessons. You feel it before you see it. The shadow of the boy, 17 maybe. A peasant, a son of no one important. His crime, theft, or sedition, or silence, it doesn't matter. All roads to the wheel were short and slippery. He stands at the edge of the circle, arms bound, legs shaking. Around him a crowd, not nobles, not clergy, just villagers. Mothers holding children, old men leaning on staves. The village priest with a candle held in trembling hands. The executioner approaches, not masked, not hidden, just tired. He carries a length of wood, as thick as a wrist, smooth from use. The boy is tied to the wheel, not crucified, woven limbs threaded between spokes, pulled tight until his body forms a star. You can feel the sun overhead, though in this chamber there is none. But you sense it. This happened outside, in the square. The sky blue and vast above indifferent rooftops. The crowd is silent. The first strike comes, a crack, not of wood, but of bone. The leg, the shin, to be precise. They always began with the limbs outward to inward. The second strike, the radius. The third, the femur. Each blow is measured, not to kill, to break, to remake. The wheel turns slowly. The boy gasps, not from pain, from disbelief, as if this is not his life, but a story told by someone else. He does not scream until the 8th strike. By then he is a sculpture of ruin. The priest steps forward, offers absolution. The boy tries to speak, but his jaw hangs loose. The wheel is raised. Mounted vertically, he is displayed. Hours pass. Crows gather before tears do. Eventually, he dies. Not from blood loss, but from stillness, exposure, the betrayal of his own heart. Too broken to keep rhythm, the villagers disperse, some with pity, some with satisfaction, all with silence. You return to the present, to the chamber. The wheel is gone, but you feel its orbit in your blood, a circle carved not in wood, but in memory. You walk to the center of the ring, stand where the boy's breath once trembled. There is no audience now, no sky, only you, and the soundless turning of something eternal. This room is quieter than the others, smaller, too, low-ceilinged, dim, lined with shelves that bow beneath. The weight of masks and bridles. Here there is no blood, no racks, no broken limbs, and yet something about this place stings sharper than iron. It is humiliation that lives here, quiet, constant, and patient. These were the devices that hurt. The soul first, and the body second. Your torchlight passes over a row of iron masks, each one twisted into mockery. Grins, snouts, exaggerated eyes, tongues lolling out like dogs. They hang in rows like faces, denied the right to rest. You step closer to one shaped like a pig's snout, its metal edges flanged wide. Its weight is heavier than it appears, heavier even than iron should feel. They called them shame masks, not meant to kill, meant to correct, and always, always meant for those considered lesser. You lift the mask gently. Inside, you see grooves where cheeks once pressed, where sweat pooled and dried. A hook meant for the tongue protrudes inward, just far enough to force speech into a whimper. A simple mechanism, devastatingly effective. She wore this one, a merchant's wife, known for her tongue not foul, not false, just sharp. She spoke of taxes, of prices, of how bread had grown thin and wine thick with sediment. She was heard too often. She was told to hush. She did not, so they brought her. Here she stood proud, at first, said she'd done no wrong, that words were not wounds. The mask was fastened over her head, clamped at the back, the tongue hook nestled deep. She could not close her mouth, could not form a clear sentence. They paraded her through the square. Children pointed, old men chuckled. The baker's apprentice threw stale crusts at her feet. Each step echoed, not with chains, but with laughter. She was made grotesque, her humanity distorted into caricature. After 3 hours, her neck ached. After 6, her legs buckled. She collapsed beside the well. No one helped her up when the mask was removed. She did not speak again for a week. When she finally did, it was only to ask if the price of onions had gone up. You return the mask to its place. On the far wall hangs another device, more brutal. In shape, a long iron bridle, its mouthpiece lined with jagged spikes. This was for the scold, the woman accused not just of speaking, but of refusing to be silent. Inside the mouthpiece, the tongue was pierced, not deeply, just enough to punish every movement. It was locked in place. The jaw would lock with It did, and if she tried to cry out, she bled. This was not pain for justice, it was pain for obedience. You walk past a wooden frame, the stocks familiar to planks, hinged, designed to clasp ankles or wrists or both. But what strikes you is not the structure, it's the graffiti. Carved into the surface, names, faces, prayers, small birds scratched with nails. People tried to mark time here, tried to prove they existed. One name stands out, Elsbeth, you trace it with your fingertip, Elsbeth. She was a widow, accused of neglecting the church gardens, of watering her own herbs on holy days. The priest said her hands were too dry for blessings, so they bound her here. For 3 days, rain came the second night. She sat in it, soaked, shivering, watched by neighbors, through shuttered windows, by morning. Her fingers had curled inward from cold. She could never cook. Again, she lived 5 more years, died in the spring. Her herbs still bloom where the stocks once stood. You return to the center of the room, surrounded by masks and bridles and beams, none designed to draw. Blood don't all designed to break something harder to heal. You extinguish the torch. For a moment, sit in the dark, don't listen, not for screams, but for laughter. The cruelest echo of all. The scent reaches you first, not smoke, but the ghost of it, sweet, acrid, like candles burned too long on an altar left to dust. You follow it down a narrow passage that curves gently left, then right, then opens without ceremony into a room unlike the others. There is no stone here, no wood, only ash, a basin blackened to the rim, a pit choked with charcoal and bone. Flecks. The floor bears no blood, only soot pressed deep into the grout, as though the ground itself had once caught fire. This is where belief was burned into bone, where salvation came not through water, but through flame. They called it purification, and in this chamber the fire had many names. You walk to the edge of the pit, kneel, touch the rim. It crumbles under your fingers, cold now, but not innocent. You close your eyes, and he is there, a monk, quiet, fragile-looking, his face long, gentle, the kind made for peace. He spoke little, read often, walked beneath trees, and whispered Latin not as prayer, but as poetry. He believed the earth was older than Genesis allowed, that the stars, too distant to be young, bore witness to something vast and beautiful and forbidden. He was not a rebel, he was a scholar, but ideas. In the wrong century, burned faster than wood. He was arrested during Vespers, did not run, did not deny. At trial, he quoted Psalms, said the firmament declared God's glory, that the universe's age only made the divine more wondrous. They told him to retract, he could not, and so they brought him here. He stood upon a mound of straw and olive branches, dressed in white, not for purity, for spectacle. The crowd gathered at dawn, mothers clutched, children merchants leaned on canes. The bishop stood in the front, hands folded. A monk placed a single wooden cross at the condemned man's feet. He knelt not in submission, in reverence. He whispered, "Forgive them, they know not." But the wind took the rest. The fire was lit at 3 corners. It rose fast. He did not scream at first, but the heat crawled fast. Up his legs, his robes, into his lungs, his hands clasped, until skin curled back from bone. Then, at last, a cry. One word, light. They said it was blasphemy, but you wonder if it was prayer, or simply a description of what he saw. The fire devoured him, but not his belief. His ashes were scattered with salt to cleanse the square. You open your eyes. The pit is still, but something flickers at its edge. Not a flame, a feather of paper. You lean closer. Charred, torn, dot, just enough remains. A phrase in Latin, half scorched, et lux in tenebris lucet. And the light shines in the darkness. You let it fall, stand. There is no smoke here, but your chest feels heavy, as if something still smolders beneath your ribs. You walk from the chamber. Slowly the air behind you grows colder, but the fire walks with you still. It is the smallest chamber yet. A single chair, a narrow table, a wall lined with tools that hang not with menace, but with method, neatly arranged, lovingly preserved, like a surgeon's collection. The stone is dry here. The air is warm, faintly scented with oil and leather. And in the corner, resting, upon a hook worn smooth by use, hangs a robe the color of dusk. This is where the torturer sat, not as a monster, not as a butcher, but as a confessor. You step forward, and the room seems to breathe with you. He enters your mind before you can stop. Him, not with a shout, not with flame, with a hand. It rests upon a shoulder, gentle, even kind. A gesture meant to calm, to anchor, to say, "This will end if you let it." You see him now, grey at the temples, brow furrowed, not from rage, but from memory. His hands are steady, careful. His face carries no cruelty, only fatigue, the weight of decades. He speaks softly, always softly, the voice of someone who has seen what screaming does to a soul. He once believed in redemption. Perhaps he still does. He remembers them all. The man who stole from the altar and sobbed before the first strike. The girl who cursed the bishop in rhyme and never blinked beneath the lash dot. But one remains with him more than any other. A child, no more than 12. She was accused of hiding a page torn from a forbidden book, a psalter annotated by someone long excommunicated. She claimed she found it in the woods, that it looked like a song, that she wanted to read it aloud. They said she'd been coached. He was ordered to extract the name. He protested. Once, briefly, then obeyed. She sat where you now stand, eyes wide, legs swinging slightly, unable to reach the floor. She answered his questions with questions, not clever, curious. Why does God punish questions? She asked. He could not answer. He began the session. No violence, not yet. That came later. He placed her hands on the table, explained each step. He told her the names of the tools. Not to terrify, to prepare. He spoke as a teacher would, and then he broke her fingers, one by one between slivers of wood, pressed slowly until the knuckles bent inward. She did not scream, not until the fourth. Even then, it was not a scream of pain, but betrayal. She cried for her father, not for rescue, but because he had been the one to hand her over by the sixth finger. She stopped speaking. He asked again. She only whispered. It was a song when it was over. He carried her himself. She never named anyone. She was returned to her. Family. Her fingers healed poorly. She never touched a book again. He requested reassignment that winter. So he stayed and became careful, not less cruel, just quieter. You look at the tools now, pliers, clamps, narrow sticks, twisted cords, each worn from use, each precise. He did not enjoy this work, but he believed in its necessity, and that belief made him dangerous. You step back from the table. Behind you, a shelf, lined with jars. Inside remnants, nails, teeth. One labeled, "Only Child," Psalm. You do not open it. You turn to leave, and as you do, you feel it again. A hand, light upon your shoulder. Not real, just the memory of someone who once thought pain could lead to grace. There is music in this chamber, but not the kind that drifts from lute or flute. It is the echo of voices once lifted in song, even as bodies broke. You hear them before you see them, faint, distant, not mournful, but strange in their stillness. Psalms, plainchant, verses remembered from lives that could not be unmade by iron. The room is long, narrow, cells cut into stone, their doors low and uneven. No lock needed, just faith or fear, enough to keep the condemned from running. Within each, a ring set into the wall. A chain still hangs from one. In another, a small wooden cross, whittled from straw. You stand still, and you feel it. The presence of someone who did not break. She was young, a nun, perhaps no more than 20, accused of blasphemy, not for speech, but for silence. She had refused to kneel at the bishop's sermon, had stared not at the cross, but out the window, said once that she saw God not in churches, but in the sky. That was enough. They brought her here. Her name was Clara. She did not weep when they shackled her. She thanked them, said, "God walks in dungeons too." They believed her mad, but madness doesn't sing. She did. Not hymns of the church, but fragments from childhood. Melodies passed through cloisters, hummed beneath breath, woven into prayer without ever touching a book. She sang as they beat her soles with rods. She sang as they pulled her fingernails with small copper tongs. She sang when they shaved her head and burned the clippings for fear of sacred contamination. She sang when they poured vinegar into open wounds, and in her voice there was no victory, only grace. The torturer said he could not continue, that her silence would have been easier. The confessor wept in private. They left her chained to the wall, and still the voice rang, not loud, but steady. Even the guards, rough men with soot on their hands, stepped lighter near her door. They called her the saint, not in reverence, but in unease. One night they entered the cell with hot iron and cold certainty. A brand, carved with letters too sacred for a woman to speak, was placed into the fire. They told her to recant, to kneel, to beg. She stood and sang. As the iron pressed into her chest, the smell of burning flesh twisted the air. She did not flinch. Her voice cracked only once, not from agony, but breath. They left her there. By morning, she was gone, not dead, just absent, her chains still warm. The mark on the wall dark and wet. Some say she escaped, others that she was taken. Some believe she was never real, but her cell remains. You stand within it now. Run, your hand along the groove in the stone where she leaned. Touch the ring that once bound her wrist, and listen, not for screams, but for the note she never finished. A single tone, hovering just above silence. This corridor feels colder than the others, not in temperature, but in spirit. Here there is no lingering trace of cries, no sobs behind the stone, only stillness, long settled like dust over parchment. The torch in your hand burns low. Even the flame seems to hush itself in this place. You reach a small chamber, no larger than a monk's cell, plain, clean, unadorned, and in its center, a stool low to the ground. No restraints, no instruments, just the stool, a table, and a single iron ring set into the wall. This is where silence was bought. You feel it at once, the weight of those who endured not because they were strong, but because they were not allowed to be weak. You step inside, and you see him not in flesh, in stillness. A man, cloaked in scholar's robes, though they hang from his frame like borrowed cloth. His beard is streaked with grey, his hands ink-stained. A Jew, accused of blasphemy, for a commentary scribbled in the margins of an old Torah scroll. A thought he forgot to hide, a metaphor to daring. They did not burn him, they did not strike him. They waited, they placed him here. Alone, no chains, no food, no candle, only questions each morning. A new voice through the door, soft, methodical, repeating the same words. What did you mean by the serpent in Genesis? What names were shared among your students? Where did the heresy begin? He did not answer, not because he refused, because he had learned. His father once told him that in some places words are traps, that truth in the wrong mouth becomes poison. So he said nothing, not on the first day, nor the second, not when they brought cold water to pour down his spine, not when they placed weights on his thighs until the bones ached with heat. Still, he said nothing. They took away warmth. He said nothing. They forced him to kneel for hours, days, until blood pooled in his knees. He said nothing. His lips cracked. He bled from silence, not from speech. And in the end, that was his confession. They never struck him, they never broke him, but they recorded his silence, noted it, filed it under refusal. He was never released. No, death was recorded, but his cell remained sealed. And when they opened it years later, they found the stool still upright and on the wall, scratched into stone with a shard of clay. One word in Hebrew, emet, truth. You reach toward the wall now, fingers brushing its rough surface. You cannot see the mark, but you know it's there. Some truths do not fade, they hide. You leave the room, step back into the corridor, and for the first time, you notice your own silence. It has grown, not empty, just full of things that cannot be said. Aloud, he was only 16 the first time he stepped into the chamber. His name is forgotten, not erased, simply never written. An apprentice, sent not to judge or command, but to learn. The way others were taught to thatch roofs or mix mortar, he was taught to handle pain. You walk the corridor he once swept, narrow, bent at odd angles. The kind of passage that stumbles into darkness, no matter how brightly the torch burns. He would come early, before the sessions began. The stone was easier to scrub while the echoes still slept. His hands were small, quick, good for polishing iron, for threading rope. He never asked what the stains were. He knew at first, he only observed. The master torturer, a broad man, soft-spoken, would explain as he worked. Where to strike, how deeply, when to pause. Pain must be paced, he would say, like breathing. The apprentice nodded, took notes, dipped cloth in vinegar, cleaned between sessions. He was told not to look into their eyes. He tried, but eyes are hard to ignore, when they are the only part of a body still free. He watched a woman confess after only a single strike, saw the master praise the technique. Not too hard, not too fast. Efficient, he said. He watched a man take 10 lashes and laugh. That one they did not praise. They beat him until he wept. The apprentice turned away. The master struck him. For that, you must not flinch. Truth, he said. Pain is honest. Most people are not. In time, the boy grew quieter. The smell of blood became normal. He flinched only when it wasn't there. Then came the day he was handed the whip. It was wrapped in linen, clean, waiting. The prisoner was already bound, young, bare-chested, breathing hard, but silent. Start slow, the master said. The apprentice hesitated, then struck. A red line bloomed. He looked away, then struck again. The skin opened. The prisoner groaned. But the sound that stayed with him wasn't that. It was the breath, how it caught. Like something breaking, not outside, but within. He finished the 10 strokes, returned the whip. The master said nothing, just nodded. He washed his hands for longer that day, scrubbed until his knuckles bled. That night he dreamed of ropes that whispered, oofed mouths that stayed shut even when opened. He stopped writing in his notebook, began carving lines into the table instead. One for every session by the end of his 3rd year. The table was covered. They offered him promotion. He refused. He disappeared a month. Later, some said he drowned, others that he became a monk. One guard swore he saw him in the woods, speaking softly to a wounded animal, weeping. You sit now on the same stool, the one where you once sat, the table before. You is smooth, polished. The carvings have been sanded down, but if you tilt your torch just so, you can still see the shadows of the marks, not words, not names, just tally lines. One for every soul he tried not to remember. The room greets you not with chains or screams, but parchment. Stacks of it, rolled, folded, sealed in wax or bound with string, each one marked in a precise clerical hand. Here the torture was not wrought by blade or flame, but by decree. This is the archive, the heart of order, a cathedral of ink and obligation. You walk slowly between shelves that rise like wooden cliffs, their contents humming with names once spoken in agony. A desk stands at the center, not grand, but immovable. Its corners are worn smooth by elbows that leaned too long, fingers that drummed while confessions were read. A single inkwell rests atop it, dry now, crusted black. The pen beside it is broken. You sit, and the pages begin to breathe. One lies open before you, an official record. Dated Midsummer, 1328. The script is careful, reverent. The words sharp, deliberate. It reads not like accusation, but invocation. Subject: Matthias of Dunley. Profession: candlemaker. Allegation: dissemination of unlicensed prayer texts. Beneath the heading: procedure notes. Method recommended: stress positioning. Preferred timeline: 3 days. Intended confession: origin of the text and list of recipients. Signed, inquisitorial notary, with 3 initials and a flourish. Nothing here screams, but everything here decides. You turn the page. Another, then another. A woman. A cook, accused of feeding a traveler without church approval. A boy, age 11, accused of mimicking a bishop's gait in jest. Each entry ends not with verdicts, but with notes on process, as if suffering could be managed like grain or wool. Standardized, refined diagrams in the margins, sketched by the same hand. A man suspended by wrists. A woman bound by ankles, head tilted back. Angles measured, arrows drawn. Beneath one sketch, too rapid a confession risks invalidating. Admission, delay desired. The law, it seems, did not require truth, only procedure. You rise, drifting toward a shelf marked special permissions. Inside, vellum scrolls, thicker than the others, stamped with seals so deep the wax has cracked. You unfurl one gently. It is a royal edict, not from the church, but the crown. It grants authority to extract verity in cases where divine silence impedes civic peace. In short, torture by legal command, secular pain, sanctified, and beneath the royal wax, another mark, smaller, but more chilling, an approval seal from the Merchants' Guild. Even gold had its stake in agony. You step back, the documents blur, each one a map of what could be done, how far it could go, how soon it must stop, not because of mercy, but because of risk. A man broken too quickly could die before confession. A woman silenced too violently might draw sympathy. The law balanced these truths with cold arithmetic. In one file, you find an anonymous note. Begin with shame, escalate with discomfort, end with choice, confession, or death. Either serves order. There is no name, just the letterhead of the local tribunal. You close the file, and suddenly, the desk feels colder. You understand now that the torturer was not the only one with blood on his hands, the scribe who recorded, the judge who signed, the bailiff who stood watch, the merchant who funded the trial, the priest who looked away. They did not scream, but they wrote. You return the parchment to its shelf, blow gently on the dust, and walk away. But even now, the ink clings to your fingertips. There is a hush in this room, softer than any before. The walls seem to draw inward, their surface smoothed by time, not violence. The floor is swept clean. A single stool sits beneath a barred window that lets in no light, only air, cold and faintly sweet, like a breath drawn too late. In the corner lies a blanket, threadbare, folded once, the kind of place that holds one story, and holds it tightly. You step inside, and she is waiting, not in flesh, but in shape, the shape of what remains when the body is bent but not broken. Her name was Marguerite, a laundress, small, wiry. She smelled of lye and ash and the rivers. Edge, she had calluses where rings might have been, a voice like crushed gravel, and arms that could lift her own weight in wet linens. She was accused of theft, not by proof. By rumor, a necklace gone missing from a minor noble's quarters. Her employer refused to defend her. She was taken at dusk, carried through alleys where the walls did not echo, where even the dogs did not bark. Her trial lasted minutes. She denied everything. They brought her here the first night. They asked again, kindly. She said nothing. The second night, they brought the cords. Her wrists were bound behind her. A wooden rod, threaded between her elbows, turned slowly, deliberately. Her shoulders strained. The socket sang. Still, she denied. The third night, they beat the soles of her feet until she could no longer stand. Still, she denied the fourth night. They wrapped her in damp cloth and left her beneath the open sky. She shivered but did not yield. On the fifth night, they left her unbound, not in mercy, but to see what she would do. She sat and sang, softly a lullaby, not for them, for herself. Her mother had sung it once, in a cottage with walls of mud and smoke, a cradle rocked by foot, a fire built from straw. The words were old, no rhyme, no verse, just rhythm, the rhythm of survival. They watched from the doorway. One guard wept, the others left. She was not tortured. Again, But she was not freed. She remained here. Weeks passed. Her body withered, but her voice remained. She sang every night, sometimes louder, sometimes not at all, but always the same tune. Then, one morning, the cell was empty. No blood, no chains, no note, just the blanket, folded and on the wall, scratched in soapstone. I did not take it. You kneel beside the mark, run your hand across it. The stone crumbles gently, not from age, but from tenderness, as though it knows. She never confessed, not because she was strong, but because there was nothing to confess, and that, in this place, was the bravest thing of all. You descend now, into the lowest chamber. The air grows colder, not with the chill of night, but with the ache of stone that has never known light. This is not a room for judgment, it is a room for conclusion. No voices remain here, no chains, no parchment, just one device, long slumbering, now waiting again. The wheel, it stands at the center, mounted upon its axle like a cross on its spine. Time has not dulled its menace. The wood is cracked, but whole. The spokes are worn where hands once gripped in desperation. It does not creak. It does not move. But you feel it, the tension in the room, like breath drawn but never released. You approach, and for the first time in this journey, the story becomes your own. You are the one brought forward now, not by guards, but by memory, not by shackles, but by witness. You feel the roughness of rope against your arms. You hear the murmurs, not cruel, not kind, just the low voice of a chamber that has seen too much. You are laid against the wheel, limbs splayed to fit between the spokes. The wood beneath your back is uneven, but familiar. It knows what comes next. You turn your head. A figure approaches. Not the inquisitor, not the torturer, not even the confessor, just a man, worn robes, clean hands, a face that could be anyone's. He carries a rod, and nothing else. He does not speak. He does not need to. This place has heard enough words. Instead, he lifts the rod and pauses, waiting for something in you to break before your body does. You feel the weight of every story before yours. The boy with the crooked arms, the midwife with her stolen voice, the scholar who whispered truth into silence. You carry them all now. He strikes, not hard, but exact. The wheel shudders. Your arm bends with it, not broken, not yet. The second strike lands at your ribs. You gasp. Not from pain, from the memory of pain. You realize then, this isn't punishment, it's performance. For history, for the room, for the future listener. Each crack is a page being turned. Each silence, between strikes, a breath held by time itself. The third blow lands. Your vision swims, and in it, you see them. Marguerite, sitting on her stool. Clara, singing through blood, the nameless monk. Wrapped in flame, they do not speak, but they watch. Not to save you, but to remind you. This is not about what you did. It's about what they need you to be. A confession, a warning, a line in a book. The rod lifts again, but it doesn't fall. You look into the man's eyes, and for the briefest moment, he hesitates, his grip falters, not from pity, but from reflection. He sees himself in you, just long enough to remember that the wheel never ends with a scream. It ends with a pause. The final turn. He lowers the rod. Steps back. You are released. The ropes loosen. Your limbs fall like tired branches. You are not victorious. You are not whole. but you are still yourself. You slide from the wheel. The floor is cold. You stand, unsteady, but standing. The man has vanished. The room is quiet. Only the wheel remains, unmoved, but waiting, always waiting. The corridor that leads away from the wheel is long and narrow, and for the first time there is air that feels untouched by human breath. No more torch-scorched ceilings, no sweat baked into stone. The silence here is not heavy, it is relieved, as though the walls too were waiting for this part to end. You walk with slow steps, your boots scuffing against smooth stone. Each step echoes not like a scream, but like the fading of one dot. You emerge into a new space, and everything is different. Sunlight pours in through a high window, fractured by dusty panes, painting golden stripes across the floor. The room is dry, still and empty except for glass display cases and placards written in quiet typeface. This is no longer a dungeon, it is a museum. You stand now not among torturers, but tourists. Their voices low, their sneakers soft against marble. They lean toward exhibits, snapping pictures, whispering facts. Children tug on sleeves. A young man reads aloud from a brochure. He mispronounces Scold's bridle. No one corrects him. The tools are here, behind glass, polished, sanitized. The pair, the rack, the masks. They sit on velvet cloth, labeled with small signs, circa mui, 500 SE. Used in religious trials, possibly apocryphal. There is no blood, no sound, only interpretation. You walk slowly past a display titled Judicial Implements of Early Europe. Inside, a wheel, smaller than the one you remember. Cleaner, the wood has been varnished. A child points to it, mouth open, giggling. His mother laughs. That's the one where they spun people, she says. She is not wrong, but she is not right. Nearby, a man stares at a pair of iron shackles. He says nothing, just looks. For a long time, you come to a wall of faces, sketches, portraits, copies from old court records. Underneath each one, name, date, accusation, sentence. You stop before a woman's drawing, eyes dark, mouth tight. Marguerite, the placard reads, accused of theft, no confession, presumed dead. You smile, just faintly. And then Clara, accused of heresy, vanished from records. There is no image, only a candle drawn in ink. You pass the desk behind glass, lies. A facsimile of a confession form, blank at the bottom, a line for signature. Beneath it, all confessions obtained willingly. The room darkens as a cloud passes the sun. The golden bands fade. Shadows stretch again, but the fear doesn't. Return, something has shifted. The pain is not here anymore. It ended, not because it was resolved, but because it had to, because people moved on, because the building changed names. You look back once before you leave. A tour guide waves to the next group. Her voice echoes, and down this hall we'll see how justice evolved. You walk through the exit, step into open air, and feel something like lightness, not joy, not peace, not peace. Just the knowledge that the door behind you has closed, and that, at last, the pain has stopped speaking. Even when the door is shut, even when the voices fade, something lingers. It clings not to the skin, but to the soul, like soot after fire, like a scent woven into old fabric. You walk now through a long gallery lined with glass. Inside, the instruments rest, still, dormant. beneath gentle light and velvet cushions. They seem harmless, curious, even beautiful in a terrible way. The iron gleams, the wood is polished, but you know better, because metal remembers. It does not weep, it does not speak, but it holds every turn of the rack, every scream into silence, every breath that left the body mid-confession. It is all here suspended, waiting. You pause before a display, a simple hook, blackened, twisted. The sign beneath it says, "Use unknown." But you know, you've seen it in the corners of cold rooms, hanging just high enough to make the prisoner rise on their toes. It was never named, it didn't need one. It was the question before the answer, the pause before the plea. You move. On to the masks. Their mouths are open in eternal mockery, grinning, wailing, drooling. No tongue ever found relief behind those faces. No voice emerged unchanged. The sign beneath one reads, "Used in communal shaming." The phrase is clean, precise, but the iron is not. You lean in, and in the curve of the metal you see her, the merchant's wife, the bruised lips, the silence that followed her for years. She does not speak now, she only looks back. You step away, farther. Down, the wheel stands again. This one older, raw, not restored. The wood splintered, the spokes warped. It tilts slightly to one side, not enough to seem broken, just tired. The placard beneath it is brief, execution device, circa 14th century. That's all, no names, no numbers, no cries. You run your fingers along the glass, it's cold, and then you notice something small, almost forgotten. A drawer beneath the case, inside, barely visible, a rosary bead, round, dull, unstrung. You remember it, it was there, beneath the iron chair, left by a hand too afraid to finish its prayer. You feel it now, the weight of a single object, left behind, not by chance, but by refusal, because memory is not always held in books or plaques or exhibits. Sometimes it's hidden in plain sight. You walk on bast tools arranged like utensils, whips coiled into tidy spirals, bridles hung like ornaments. The people here murmur. They read, they nod. Some look away, and you carry them. The boy on the rack, the nun who sang, the child who whispered light into flame. They are not in the cases, they are in the silence between steps, in the stillness behind your eyes. You reach the gallery's end. A single plaque is mounted on the wall. It reads, "Let these objects speak for those who no longer can." But you know better. They never stopped speaking. They just waited for someone to listen. You return once more to the threshold, the doorway where it all began. The hinges are still, the stone unchanged. But something within you is different. You've walked the corridors of pain, met its keepers, heard its hymns. Now the silence welcomes you, not to punish, but to release. It is not the end of the story, only the closing of a door. The torch has long since gone cold. You carry no flame, and yet you see clearly. The dungeon breathes behind you, but its breath is slow, dreaming, no longer watching. You stand in the center of the empty chamber, the same one where straw once rustled beneath your boots, where the shadows reached for your thoughts. Now the air is still. The echoes have faded. The tools sleep in glass. The voices rest in stone. You remember them all. Marguerite, her lullaby. In the dark, Clara, who sang to keep her soul intact. The apprentice, carving tally marks in silence, the Inquisitor whispering of divine order through clenched teeth. They do not cry out now. They do not linger in pain. They are home, home, not in heaven or myth, but in memory. The chamber is still. The iron has cooled. Even the wheel no longer turns. You kneel, not in reverence, but in reflection. You've touched the instruments, felt their weight, heard their purpose. But now you set them down. One by one, gently, without fear, they no longer hold power. Only lessons you rise. Place your palm against the door. Its grain is rough, familiar. You do not push it open. It opens for you. The light beyond is soft, not blinding, not bold, just enough. You step through, and behind you, the door closes. Not with a slam, but with a sigh, as if the chamber, too, was weary of remembering. You pause once more. Look back, but there is no need. You carry the story now, and it will sleep in you. Gently, not to haunt, but to remind that the past is never gone, only resting, waiting for someone to return. And listen, as the last breath of this story fades into stillness, thank you for walking through these shadows with me. If it touched your heart or opened your eyes, I invite you to return, to listen again, to rest again in the quiet corners of forgotten history. Subscribe if you'd like to journey with me once more. What moment stayed with you longest? Whose silence spoke the loudest to your heart? As the echoes of the dungeon fade into stillness, I thank you for walking through the shadows with me. If this story left a trace upon your heart, subscribe and return when the night is quiet again. There are more forgotten corridors of history to explore gently, together and without fear. What image stayed with you the longest? Could you have remained silent under the weight of the wheel? Which voice in the dungeon felt closest to your own?